ask you to respond to, on the Environmental Audit Committee, they particularly highlighted the issue of off-site construction and, by implication, lightweight buildings, whereas actually, interestingly, Richard flagged the issue of heavyweight buildings or buildings of high thermal mass and the problem of dissipation. So I wondered if I could ask you to respond on that particular issue, whether you think it's sort of unproven and something that has also to be researched and will come out eventually in the regulation. Could I? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of, is that okay? This is absolutely one of the areas where, let's say there was more ambiguity and weakness in the literature we reviewed. Very often thermal mass was mentioned anecdotally without much evidence, and there's not that many papers that clearly say that, by the way, we need to dissipate the heat. So we all think about a Mediterranean house where it's fantastic, etc., high thermal mass, but they tend to be in areas, rural areas, the temperature drops at night, etc., etc., and you can open the windows. So certainly in the Good Homes Alliance tool, what we are taking is quite a cautious approach, so not allowing it as a mitigation factor, but not heavily weighted, and making it very clear that you can only account for it if there is secure, quiet nighttime ventilation.
Anastasia, do you want to say something about the diurnal variation? Because, you know, I know it was implicit in the old UK climate impact programme that we would continue with this sort of cooling off at night effect, but I gather on the more recent predictions there's evidence that we're losing that sort of nighttime cool off, not just in urban areas.
Yes, I mean that's a problem. I think it will be a problem mainly in urban areas where this diurnal range is going to get smaller and smaller because of all the absorptive heat during the day. And a lot of people actually come into the cities and they live in flats, which means that the percentage of the population at risk of overheating is going to go up along with the temperatures.
Victoria, do you want to talk about the lightweight, heavyweight thing, or is that just something that's in your radar for the review?
Works. Yeah, so I'd certainly say it's on our radar. We're very aware of it. Within the research that we did, we considered the impact of thermal mass. We did model that, and it did chime with what's already been discussed. And we're also very aware of the changes as we go forward on diurnal changes. And part of our way of dealing with that in the research was also to look at not only the current climate but future climate, so considering that diurnal change will reduce. Yeah.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to add anything? Not really.
Just two small observations. One,
turn it on, though. It's on.
It's on. It is on. Okay, just two.
A bit closer then.
Two small observations. One is that it seems to me, and this arose in the discussions on the housing research that Victoria was talking about, is that the modelling tools that are being used are modelling tools that were developed for non-domestic buildings. And when you try and interrogate the assumptions on overheating in both TAS and the other tools that are available, IES for instance, it's very hard to work out what it's actually assuming about the way that the thermal mass is applied and how the ventilation regime is working. And I think the default mechanism there is providing some beneficial effect. What we need to do is do more research on buildings in use. And I'd refer people to actually some of the GHA studies. So even a project in Brighton, so outside the sort of immediate heat island effect of London, near the station, One Brighton, is a project that was forensically studied in two studies by Innovate UK, so the original TSB program. A horrendous problem with thermal mass. And if you can't find the papers on the GHA website, then I suggest a book published by REBA called Better Buildings, which is a summary of all of that research. And it seems to me we're chronically under provided with information about actually what is happening. And as a result, the modeling tools are not necessarily reflecting the condition that we're trying to design for.
Very good point. Thank you. Oh, yeah, some more hands. Gentleman there, please. Sorry, have we got a mic? Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Can you say who you are as well, please?
Yep. Alberto, I work for Hurley, sustainability consultant, and one of my main work is deal with the overheating issue. Just yesterday, I had a discussion with a colleague about IS and how the thermal mass is acquired and used on the software. And I have the feeling that we have the feeling that is simply based on the clock. So during the day, the thermal mass absorbs energy. During the night, it releases energy, regardless of what is happening in the surrounding area, buildings, or air temperature. But this one is not really my question. The question is for Victoria. So, during the presentation, we saw that at the moment, the planning are asking for instance, the SAP overheating assessment. We know that the SAP assessment has some limitation. Do you think there is a bit of delay on the government to tackle this aspect about the overheating? And if the answer is yes, how the government is trying to have a solution, a quick solution? And in the case that the answer is no, that you are acting based on what is your time scale, how you want to deal with the planning officer that still requires sub-assessment for the overheating? Because at the moment, for what I know, potentially we are designing buildings that will going to overheat, but on the paper, they are complying with the overheating requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that government does has to be very well considered and based on firm evidence. So up until now, we have felt that we didn't have the evidence to act on this issue. Whether or not everyone agrees with me is another matter, but that has been our view. But this piece of research that we've done has now given us the sort of information that we need to know how to act. So government always bases their policy around costs and benefits. So because we now have this information about the costs and benefits of mitigating overheating, it now means that we can do something. And we've made this commitment last year in the response to the AC, so that we will consult on a method for reducing overheating. So yeah, there will be changes to come. And I know that government doesn't always move as fast as everyone would like, but yeah, there will be changes. Consultations come up, it will be this year, so yeah, look out for it.
Thank you very much. And probably a bit of a swipe there from the questioner about the transition arrangements, where we get early registration and therefore we're potentially creating more and more buildings which overheat despite a change in regs. Chris, Sophia, sorry, can we go to one more question, please? Thank you.
Chris Twin, consultant and, yes, contributor to a certain degree. But my question tries to open the equation up to make sure we're not dealing with the symptoms at the wrong end. We're talking about things like urban heat island. And there's good practice from around the world where I've had opportunity to work, which we don't seem to be applying here. The idea of understanding how the heat balance in a city works different from the countryside, and how we can mitigate that. For example, Singapore, in the requirements for leaf area on all sites, the fact that a tree has 6 times its footprint in leaf area, for example, and they've been specifying things like 3 times your leaf area, your site area as leaf area, and that's high density Singapore. But also issues like, for example, if you look at the breakdown of extra heat gain in a city, transport is a key element. The switch to electric vehicles means we potentially, at point of use, reduce heat output from vehicles by about 80%. Now, are we looking at all of these components to make sure we're setting the correct context within which that ventilation we now require to avoid overheating will actually work?
Thanks, Chris. Any comments on setting and microclimate? Cities. Cities, wind, breezeways, leaf area,
It's
all
a
that
difficult
stuff.
one for me to say too much about because I'm not a planner. But certainly the MPPF was clear that we need to be considerate of climate change. And if you read the MPPF, it is very clear in that respect. Also, we've set out all of our... Chris is just laughing at me. Terrible, Chris. Also, within the National Adaptation Programme, we have set out all the ways in which we're going to try and deal with these sorts of issues. But we will consider these sorts of things in all of our work across government.
Thank you. One last question, very quickly, if I may. Sorry, Richard.
I was just going to say that, if you're going to look to the planning system, we're really finding the most broken tool in the toolbox if we're going to sort this out. And what we really need is a planning system that's visionary and anticipates a view of what a future city will be like, a future Manchester or a future London. We cannot have a reactive system if we want to tackle these things. And so we do need to step back and think much more about what the future environment will be like.
I wish. Very, very quickly, please, because we're about...
Thank you very much. I'm Hebel Shakari. I'm senior lecturer in the University of East London. Thank you all for the very informative sessions. It was mostly focusing on new build, but we're really interested in looking at retrofit as well. So as far as the time could allow, if you can just give us some recommendations, what would you think for retrofitting, improving the existing buildings, particularly tower blocks we're looking at in London, whilst when you improve it further, you're going to have more overheating risks, but you still need to do that to reduce the energy use in heating. So what could be the balance, or what could be the tips for that?
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, because the Zero Carbon Hub work, and indeed our Good Homes work, is really focused on new homes, but Part L and Part F, well, to some extent, certainly Part L will surely be addressing the existing buildings as well, Victoria.
So our research only dealt with new homes because this is where we know where we believe the large problem is, and also you have to start somewhere, and it's a very reasonable place to start. We didn't address the issue of existing homes. A lot of the learning will be transferable, which is encouraging, but I would say from our perspective there would certainly be a lot more research required in this space to understand some of the issues, and we would have to do further analysis of the costs and the benefits at the point of retrofit. In our commitment, we've said that we're tackling new homes only for the foreseeable.
I think the principles are the same. The way you design, the way you assess your mitigation options should be the same. So all the stuff, the tools that I described should be the same, either for brand new building or when you do a major refurbishment. I think the higher risk is when you change properties to deal with one thing, let's say energy efficiency, but you don't look at the holistic performance or the year-round performance. So, for example, when you add insulation to homes, usually you look at the benefits during the winter, but you don't assess how that is going to affect the summer performance. So I would say the overall principles are the same. So when you are over-insulating, either new or refurbishment, you need to understand the implications and then look at mitigation options to reduce the heat that is going to be accumulating indoors.
I think we're going to have to hold back there, because actually that's a whole other session, isn't it, more or less? Look, could I ask you to join with me in thanking our excellent speakers?